We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margalus, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Sunday, June 23rd, 2024, as we record a new episode for you guys. The Chicago White Sox traveled to Detroit this past weekend, and nothing new on the win-loss related front. Erick Fedde was great, but the White Sox offense failed to support him. Drew Thorpe looked much better in his third career start, but then the Tigers offense broke out in a big way against Jonathan Cannon, scoring 8 runs against him in 1 inning of work. So the White Sox lost 2 out of 3. They lose another series. They're 21-58. Now the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Atlanta Braves for a makeup game, and the Colorado Rockies visit this week in Chicago. We'll touch on the upcoming homestand, but we are also at the halfway point of the 2024 season this week. What better time to have a P.O. Sox episode? Yes, we have many questions to answer from both our Patreon supporters and Twitter followers. We'll get to those questions in a minute, but joining me in this episode is Sox Machine's beat reporter, James Fegan, as Jim Margalus continues to have much needed and much deserved time off away from the White Sox. And
he split his post.
Yeah, the good news, though, James, the White Sox are going to see some postseason baseball with the minor league affiliates. The Birmingham Barons clinched in the first half, and I also think the Cannonballers, the Kannapolis Cannonballers, also clinched. So there will be postseason baseball for the White Sox minor league affiliates. Mission accomplished for White Sox player development, right?
Right.
Yes.
Win-loss is all that matters in the minors. We swung all the way back to winning and learning how to win is the only important thing. Beat up on the other low A teams with all the 24-year-olds you need. Just make sure the culture of winning is furthered. That's all that matters.
Well, Sergio Santos has been pretty consistent with his comments. For those that have gotten a chance to read them on SoxMachine.com in the minor keys, Sergio manages the Birmingham Barons, and he's managed elsewhere, and he's won elsewhere. So learning how to win is important. But I think if your minor league affiliate, your minor league teams are winning, that might be a talent thing more than anything. And if you have more talent than other teams in the league, then hopefully that talent creates a tsunami to the majors, and that translates. That's the hope. We saw a little bit of that in 2021 for the White Sox, but clearly not enough. And when you watch the games in Detroit this weekend, it's still pretty clear it's not enough. The White Sox, again, losing 2 out of 3. They lost Friday 2-1 in a very hilarious finish, in which Paul DeJong forgot how many outs there were, James. Lineup Andrew Benintendi. And Dion didn't get back to first in time. So your classic 8-6-3 double played it in that game. Drew Thorpe was excellent on Saturday. Nice bounce back for him as the White Sox won 5-1. And then on Sunday, they got thrashed 11-2. So Drew Thorpe was good. Jonathan Cannon got beat up. Let's talk about Drew Thorpe. Thorpe, what do you think worked for Drew in his third start, his ability to bounce back?
Um, I mean, I felt like in the write-up I was maybe overly critical of him. I mean, he did walk four. I'm sure he'd say that's like his kind of command wasn't like ideal and probably hasn't been like at what maybe we've expected in his first three starts. But it's like you can catch yourself in the trap of being like, oh, he got himself in trouble a couple times. He didn't really get any whiffs with his slider or cutter. He was able to use this elite changeup to get 10 whiffs, but we all knew he could do that. Like seeing it in play, he does there's a lot of credit for just how effective it is and how much it really, gets him out a lot of stuff. I still do want to see, the growth in the other areas or see the fastball command, maybe see increased velo as things go down or more consistent usage of his slider and able to get whiffs with that as well. But like it is, he gets a lot of changeup. It's really not something you can be discounted, and it is something that makes everything play up in the sense that like you don't need much more than like 3 to 5 well executed sliders for it to be a different look on top of this pitch that's already going to dominate so much attention. So um I yeah, I can quibble on some things like whether this is really an elite pitching prospect or is this kind of a mid-rotation guy? What role does he play? But it is astounding like how good his changeup is right out of the gate. I mean, that strikeout where he struck out Wensiel Perez while throwing 5 in a row, and like even as he knows he's getting spammed like with changeups, he's still swinging out in front of them because he literally is just guessing every time what it is because it can't be identified. Really impressive stuff for anyone to have.
Yeah, again, he at times reminds me of Lucas Giolito when Giolito was on, and some of
Yeah.
the issues that Thorpe has. He's just or the kind of similar challenges that Giolito had when he was struggling. There's just a huge height difference, and right now there's a bit of a velocity difference. But again, it just reminds me, like the same way we talk about Drew Thorpe and what's working for him and what isn't working for him, harkens back to conversations when Lucas Giolito joined the White Sox and was pitching the majors back in 2018. But hopefully, Drew Thorpe doesn't suffer the same type of season that Giolito did in 2018. Jonathan Cannon got beat up. And looking, watching the first couple of innings, Detroit was on him. And Cannon just could not get anything lower in the zone. Like he was missing too much over the middle of the plate, James. Like he couldn't establish the very top of the strike zone. And he wasn't anywhere near the low part of the strike zone. So if there was anything over the heart of the plate, it was literally over the heart of the plate. And he got hurt in a big way.
Yeah, like he certainly wasn't sharp. It's hard to like see that type of production in a first inning and not think like I think he's probably tipping in some way, or certainly not as sensitive as he's been at other moments. Like he didn't discount it. Watching Daryl's video of the interview, post game interview afterwards, it doesn't seem like it's initially what they're all harping on and saying like, oh, he was obviously tipping, but I'd wonder about it. But yeah, it also seemed like he wasn't locating well, didn't look sharp, and then, has a throwing error behind him on top of it. It seemed like a perfect storm more than maybe like one thing, but it certainly doesn't look good. I mean, Cease had some inning or a game like the last season when he was tipping, and he still like got into the fifth, even like with a lot of like people recognizing it. So even when you're kind of getting, knocked around and they're sitting on one thing, there's ways to manage it better or get through it better when you're executing. If they know it's coming, but you're still locating, it's harder to get crushed the way he did on Sunday. So I don't want to totally throw it out, but also if I really analyze it into like this is what part of my consistent vision of what Jonathan Cannon's going to be, then it would be probably overly cynical. So I want to let it breathe and see what the adjustment is from the start rather than looking at it because man, something wasn't right.
Yeah, and his next start could be the Colorado Rockies. So that could help out as far as Jonathan Cannon. Again, Detroit, though, not a very strong offensive team, but jumped on him. And his previous 3 outings were excellent. His previous 2 starts that he made, almost a complete game shot against the Houston Astros and 7 innings of 1-run ball against the Seattle Mariners. So I just view this as a hiccup. And again, this is all part of the learning curve now for this 2024 White Sox season. When you have rookie starting pitchers, they're going to have bad outings. It's just a matter of how they adjust. Drew Thorpe adjusted well. Jonathan Cannon, it's his turn to adjust. Over on the position player side, Oscar Colas was optioned again by the Chicago White Sox as he was making room for Eloy Jimenez, who joins the White Sox. And I wonder if the White Sox are going to have to put Eloy back on the injured list because James, Eloy doesn't look healthy. And in the spotlight is the seventh inning. So Eloy hits a single. And in the video replay, immediately it looks like Eloy is in pain running down to first base. Then Gavin Sheets doubled, and it looked like Eloy was running at half speed to third base. And over our friends at Sox and 35th, shout out to them on social media being able to capture the video, and we put in the game recap in soxmachine.com. Pedro Grifol was caught on camera pointing at his leg, trying to, I guess, non-verbally communicate with Eloy, are you okay? And then Eloy stayed in the game, and he would later score off of Nicky Lopez's two-run single, but he still batted. He took one more at bat before the game ended, and he grounded out, and he barely got out of the batter's box. So Eloy, clearly, James, is not healthy. And I just have to bring this point up. Like, why? If Eloy's not 100%, and you were in Arizona last weekend, and you got a chance to see him at the Complex League, and you reported that Eloy was not running very hard down there. If he's not 100%, why is he in the majors?
Well, he shouldn't be if he's not, right? So that's the easy answer. But at least from the reports, seemed like Grifol was pretty surprised that this had popped up as an issue. At least he had been reporting that he had no issues before the last couple of days. So it seems a little speculative to say more than like, well, I'm sure, I guess they thought he was healthy. He was reporting healthy up to this, and then he just recurred again. His return was, it was pretty much a month and a day since he got put on the injured list, and he was projected at 4 to 6 weeks. So he did push on the quicker side. More broadly, and not necessarily just Eloy, is that especially, talking to Tim Anderson about this last year, and his decision to play through it. Some of that was being told that he wasn't going to get any worse, but also he's like, I need to play, man. I've been on the IL like too much the last couple seasons. I can't just get this reputation of the guy who can't post. Like, that's something that I think a lot of these guys have the attitude of, maybe it's something I have to play through. Maybe it's nagging, but like, I've already got this label on me that I can't play. Like, I need to just get through it. I think that's something that has weighed a lot on this group of being tagged as this and having a reputation when they're maybe seeking their next contract, that they're not reliable to log a full schedule, that they're just like, I've already gone through my allotted time. I need to get back on the field. I want to do whatever I can do to get there as much as possible and rack up games played, because like, I know what's kind of hanging over me.
That's a good point, James. I wonder from a White Sox perspective, though, like, how do you manage that? Because you want to do right by them. Like, they want to play. And Eloy is one of the more talented hitters for this Chicago White Sox organization right now. But you just option Oscar Colas. And I think that there's a transition window. Like, he can't come back to Chicago in 9 more days after being optioned. Is that correct?
Unless it's for an injury. So, of course, if Eloy went on the IL, then he could come back.
Okay, there we go. So that's where I needed the clarification. Thank you. So maybe Oscar comes back if after the flight home from Detroit to Chicago, they realize that Eloy is not going to be able to play. If Eloy doesn't play in this Dodgers series, then the onus goes back onto the White Sox medical staff. Like, what are we doing here? Again, like, why does this continue to happen? You guys said that this was going to stop happening. It continues to happen. But I think you bring up a really good point. Like, if Eloy's the one pushing this, because his contract is going to get bought out after this season and he's going to be a free agent, then I see the purpose for him trying to gut through this to show to teams that he's still a major leaguer, because right now he is dangerously close, James, to getting like a Paul DeJong type of contract, maybe a Tim Anderson type of contract, like 1 year, $5 million. Prove it that you can actually hit, prove it that you can actually post, using your terminology and playing games. Like, it's going to be a prove it deal. Far cry from what he's making in 2024 with the Chicago White Sox. So your point makes sense, but just like looking at this entire situation overall, like, if Eloy's too sore and he can't hit and he can't play against the Dodgers, it's going to raise serious questions of like, what are the White Sox doing here with Eloy Jimenez? Now, we also got this tweet, and I shout out to Vinny on Twitter. He's at VinnyC52. And he pointed this out to me, James, because Eloy's not the only injury prone DH in Major League Baseball. The New York Yankees have one as well in Giancarlo Stanton. And Stanton also suffered a hamstring injury. And now Stanton's on the injured list. He's going to miss at least a month. And Vinny tweeted at me after doing some research. Since 2018, Stanton has missed 317 games. Eloy has missed 314 games. So very similar, but there's no risk of Stanton being bought out or being DFA'd because when Giancarlo Stanton is in the lineup, he's been far more productive than Eloy Jimenez in the lineup. But I thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, something that both Eloy and I think Luis certainly has struggled with is that they're pretty swing first players. They are very kind of instinctive up there, and a lot like they're very reliant on their timing. And you've seen both of them go through when they return kind of this prolonged, usually a longer like runway to kind of get up to speed. I think we're only starting to see it with Luis, and frankly, the Detroit series maybe said we're still in it as far as him getting back to speed. Eloy is very much the same way. And something I talked about him like St. Louis the last time we were, talked about one is like he feels like he goes back to zero in kind of getting his rhythm up like every single time this happens. And that it's something I think has affected his numbers big time the last, 2 seasons where it's just a bulk or the half of his production that we see that's in his final stat line is just him getting back to speed again. And we maybe see like a week or two of like, oh, this is Eloy as a DH. There's still hitting talent here. And that's when something else flares up again. And that's when we start at zero and we see 2-3 weeks of Eloy like hitting everything on the ground and just still kind of finding his way. And then he's able to like pack a lot into a week. And then we start back at zero again. So that's part of their inclination of not wanting to go on the IL, not wanting to take these pauses, not wanting to get shut down. And, on top of just, I don't want to be defined by this for my career.
Well, I know it's a tough reputation to overcome. There's many in Major League Baseball that get that label and it's hard for them to shed it. So I get their perspective, but from like a team perspective for the White Sox, they also have a reputation of poorly managing injuries, especially in the last 5, maybe plus seasons. So this is a difficult thing to balance right now, and we'll see what happens. Maybe Eloy is able to play right away on Monday against the Los Angeles Dodgers, but he doesn't look healthy. Doesn't look like he could run or sprint down the first base line. I know Luis Robert is also not healthy. Just watching him in center field, but he's gutting it through right now. We'll see how these guys fare in the upcoming series. Now, for that series, Los Angeles Dodgers roll into town, and the Dodgers are the Dodgers. They're 48-31 this season. They have an 8.5 game lead over the San Diego Padres. They're 23-15 on the road this year. If the season were to end today, they would be the second seed in the National League postseason as we get close to the midway point of the season, with the Philadelphia Phillies still having the best record in the National League, and the Phillies actually have the best record in all of Major League Baseball. The Dodgers are dealing with some injuries. You're not going to see Mookie Betts in this series, but Shohei Ohtani, we will see plenty. And boy, does Ohtani love hitting at Guaranteed Rate Field, especially last year. It just seemed like he hit a home run in every single at bat. So White Sox pitchers have a lot to handle facing Ohtani. Your pitching probables for this series, all these games are at 7:10 p.m. Central Time, all night games. On Monday, Garrett Crochet gets the first opportunities. He leads the league in strikeouts, so it'll be a great test for Crochet against his loaded Dodgers lineup. Tuesday, Chris Flexen will get the ball. And then on Wednesday, Eric Fedde gets the ball. Another opportunity for Fedde to improve his trade value, because if he pitches well against the Dodgers, it helps out that resume and his probability of getting dealt to a contender, and the White Sox can work on adding more players to their pipeline.
Plus, the bus is just across the parking lot, so you can walk over. It's probably the easiest time for them to do
it. That would be a very Dodgers thing to do. They're like, wow, Fedde was great. How about He just joins the team flight back home.
Or just actually, Eric Fetty won't be starting against us tonight.
That's that Moneyball scene, right?
We'll be facing Michael Soroka. Please and thank you.
That's great. That's great. With this particular series, like, again, I'm curious on how Crochet and Fetty do against the Dodgers. I think it's going to be entertaining as hell. Like Crochet facing Shohei Ohtani, that's going to be a ton of fun. But when you have a team that's superior like this, when the Dodgers roll into town, is there a part of you, James, that just feels more interested in the opposition than the White Sox? Because we don't get a chance to watch the Dodgers a lot in person.
I take an interest in terms of this will be a bigger audience. It's kind of like whenever they're playing like a getaway day when like there's no other game on and you can see like the national baseball watching audience like turn its eyes to the White Sox for once, and usually there's some reaction of like, what is this? Has this been like this all this whole time? Is this how these people live? So I think just playing the Dodgers kind of gets it. I realize it's going to kind of form the vision of what the White Sox look like to a larger viewing audience. So seeing like a bunch of people who watch Dodger baseball being like, oh, Garrett Crochet is actually good, would be like a treat or interesting. Or something like atypical will happen, or like Martin Maldonado goes 2 for 4 with like a homer, and people are like, "What? Why are they saying he's washed up?" And the fans are going like go ballistic at like every national writer who thinks Martin Maldonado looks good offensively. I think it's fun to see what kind of weird microcosms get extrapolated, by an outside audience.
Yeah, and for the White Sox, you're going to face James Paxton on Monday. And they're going to face Gavin Stone on Wednesday and Bobby Miller on Tuesday. So those are the pitching matchups. A lot of velocity with Bobby Miller on Tuesday start with Chris Flexen. James Paxton's like defying injury history and time. He's been pitching really well for the Dodgers. I don't know if it's very sustainable. Gavin Stone's someone that I've been paying attention to for a couple years now for any hypothetical trades between the White Sox and the Dodgers. And he's starting to pitch really well for the Dodgers.
Stone is
well.
See the really good, like, here's what Drew Thorpe might look in a year or two, like in development, where they're very similar right-handed changeup artists.
Yes. So we'll see how the White Sox do, at least on that front. But yeah, just looking at the Dodgers FanGraphs right now and their offensive numbers, and I'm just jealous. Like Ohtani is already a 4.2 WAR according to FanGraphs, 23 homers, 57 RBIs, 16 stolen bases. There's just so many players on the Dodgers team that have at least 100 plate appearances this year with a weighted run created plus over 100. Like they got 10 guys on FanGraphs and the White Sox have like 4. so Crochet and Fetty, Flexen, man, if you want to pitch the game of your life, you're going to have to give the White Sox a chance to win one of these games against the mighty Dodgers this week. And then again, after the Dodgers series, Thursday, it's a 3:00 game. It's a makeup game from a rainout in April. The Atlanta Braves pop into town for a game before the Rockies come in town for the weekend series against the White Sox. So that's what's happened on the field for the White Sox, and that's what's coming up. But what's coming up on the Sox Machine podcast is your guys' questions. So after a quick word from our sponsors, let's answer them in an extended version of P.O. Sox. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Lots of star power coming through Guaranteed Rate Field this week, especially a chance to watch Shohei Ohtani hit some bombs against White Sox pitching. Take advantage of Game Time's features to get the best seats at the best price, as walk-up traffic could be heavier with Dodgers fans coming into town. For Monday's game, there are tickets in section 153 currently going for $41 a seat on Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. Like I mentioned before tossing a break, it was a regular segment on this episode, and we moved it over to a mailbag that you guys can participate monthly for those that help support us on patreon.com/Sox Machine. But I figured with Jim away and we were getting up to the halfway point of the 2024 season, why not bring back P.O. Sox to the podcast? So James and I will answer your guys' questions. And the first question that we have comes from our Patreon supporters, so we'll get to the questions from Twitter in a moment. But Andrew Siegel wrote to us, James, if players like Chris Flexen and Nicky Lopez aren't moved at the deadline, do you think they will be DFA'd so the White Sox can give playing time to younger players?
I would be optimistic that they could be moved at the deadline because both of them were having like the same or worse seasons last year and were like moved as just like Flexen's, you can throw him anywhere. It's not like he's going to be too particular about what innings he gets. And Lopez can play middle infield, got acquired by the Braves last season. And even though they didn't have much use for him as far as like in their lineup or any kind of offensive role, like just having guys who have some sort of versatility has some value. But I think that would apply to the Sox if they don't get moved because Flexen, it can give you innings anywhere. They're certainly not overloaded with pitching talent, especially in the bullpen where they have like a lot of like guys who are like either got kicked out of this rotation or got kicked out of the Charlotte rotation and kind of are multi-inning guys, but they don't have a lot of leverage options. So I don't think they would push aside Flexen for what he's been because he would be useful in some form. Lopez, like I get more of the case, but like who's the young player who's really going to see second base reps this season on the White Sox? I don't think that they really like. Jacob Gonzalez is probably like someone who's interesting as far as like could be tabbed as a second baseman in the future from where they're at. Maybe Brooks Baldwin, but he's still at Double-A. I just think it'd be a stretch to really see anyone having an impact on that as far as young players like beyond like a September call up for a little bit. And I don't know if that would necessarily a roster move or what. So I would say no on each, and unless you're counting Danny Mendick who's 30 as a young player, but I think he's technically older than Nicky Lopez. So yeah, I don't see necessarily the big push to get Lopez out there, especially if you're trading DeYoung and your infield's kind of lighter. Yeah, I don't think so.
If they're not dealt before the deadline, they could still be dealt before the waiver deadline, right? In August, that last chance that teams can add before their rosters are set and who can participate in the postseason.
That's like trickier, especially like the non-waiver. It's supposed to be just a straight deadline, so I don't think like guys are supposed to be postseason eligible after that unless they get like released. So I wouldn't think that'd be the route.
Okay.
You certainly see like guys like Elvis Andrus like get released and stuff like that and float around, but you kind of getting released so that they can get another opportunity. But I don't think that they would hold any trade leverage anymore after the July 30th.
Andrew, thank you so much for your question. Our next question comes from Doug Wirtz. He has a two-parter. His first part, which relief pitcher wouldn't you trade? I don't think there's anyone untouchable from the White Sox bullpen, right, James?
Which reliever wouldn't you trade? Like, I guess like does Jordan Leisure count? And even then, like,
yeah,
if the price is right, I think like probably Tommy Kahnle in 2017 was not someone we thought they would necessarily had to trade because of there's a lot of years of control left. But ultimately he was a reliever. They viewed it as volatile. They weren't banking on like him being the same form in 2-3 years. And I think that's true of pretty much any reliever, even someone who's like really young and promising. Steven Wilson having 3 years left. He's still 29 and went on the IL this year. I just don't think you bank on him what he's going to be long term. So I would think all relievers can go. Just don't think they'd be inclined to like trade Leisure inherently or feel like we got to get some value off of this. But also Leisure's currently in AAA, so he's not really going to get the we need relief help market on him right now.
Doug, thank you so much for your question. Our next question comes from Joe Meckel, and Joe wrote to us, what are your thoughts on the Christian Mena and Gregory Santos trades now? It doesn't seem like the trades have benefited either teams.
I mean, if I'm Arizona, I'm not like giving up on Mena just because he has like a 5 ERA in AAA because Christian Mena is like 22. So I would say it's a little bit incomplete there, though I'd certainly from the White Sox side wouldn't be happy with like how much what we've seen out of Dominic Fletcher, but also just like what kind of opportunity he's really had to really establish himself, especially as kind of an older player that is kind of supposed to be ready to take hold. It's not someone necessarily you were still thinking as like someone who need to develop this year in a huge way where we're at, where we haven't seen much production majors or AAA is not like a bad result. The Santos trade, like, yeah, obviously is not provided what Seattle wanted. You haven't really gotten like impact from the White Sox side, but I do think a significant portion of the reason for that it was the 69th pick for why they did that deal. So from just stockpiling draft budget room and also just the pick itself, I think the White Sox still probably say like this was worth it for us, especially where they're focused, especially knowing that like Santos, if they still had him right now, would be much degraded as an asset because he's currently not healthy. So they wouldn't probably be able to trade him at this deadline. So I think they're happy just having that pick right now. I think the Dominic Fletcher, you really want to see him get like real burn and some real opportunity in the second half if that's possible from what they're able to do at the deadline.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for your question. Eddie's asking, well, he wrote to us, being a fan of both Jerry Reinsdorf teams is pain. How do the White Sox medically compare to other teams? And this has been a big focal point. I just harped on the medical team regarding Eloy Jimenez. So what have they told you, James, that they're trying to change so they get better results, especially on the biomechanical front?
Not a lot of specifics that I would like point to.
Is that like secret sauce? Like they don't want people to know
Yeah,
what they're
like
working on? Okay.
usually the most I've like I remember is like I felt like I got something out of when he admitted like they were going to make some changes to their routines. Was it mid 2021, whatever year that preceded those mid-season comments like preceded, and that was when they had like Adam Engel's like hamstring like kept tearing and all the injuries of the first half of 2021 with Robert's hip flexor. They admitted like we're gonna change things. It was like as candid as they got, and then that was the offseason that they replaced Alan Thomas. But they certainly tout that they've invested in biomechanics and that they've do a lot of research and hiring Jeff Head and talking about like how much they monitor all usage now, and that's why Eloy's sprints when he's rehabbing, see him like with that little like heart monitor, step monitor that you see soccer players wearing all the time that like says that. So they make references to how much like tracking of movement and speed intensity that they see guys doing. I remember when some other time Eloy got hurt that they said that he had ratcheted up to like a speed. There's the Minnesota injury when he tore his back tendon of his knee against the Twins. They said that he had hit a speed trying to run out that infield single that he had not hit at any point yet this season. Even in spring training, even in any sort of like ratcheting him up exercises. So they were a little bit like, why are you kind of maxing out to this degree at this level that we haven't trained you for at this juncture? It was a little bit of their message to him after that. So they make references to it, but they don't talk about like we have embraced this new philosophy of this specific thing and spell it out for us in great detail. You just hear a lot more references to having biomechanics, but a lot of biomechanic references are about like we made a mechanical adjustment or Jacob Gonzalez's swing changes or biomechanically informed is what you hear about it more than this long layout of what the plan is now.
Got it. So Eddie, maybe one day we'll get more clarification, but I think we're just going to have to watch the results and see if the White Sox can keep guys healthy. I mean, the onus is also on the players themselves to make sure that they are prepared and they're paying attention to what their body is telling them to stay on the field. But thank you so much for your question, Eddie. I don't know what the Bulls can do other than, I don't know, I guess keep trading players without getting picks back. I'm sure that strategy is going to work. And then we got this. James, big fan, no draft picks. Our final question from our Patreon supporters before we get into the Twitter questions. This comes from Alex, and Alex wrote to us just under a year into the job. What has Chris Getz done that has been unquestionably good? The Santos and Bummer trades for, at best, quadruple A guys. The Cease trade looks fine and could turn out to be good, but probably isn't yet. Keeping Grifol is a disaster. The only things I could think of are signing Paul DeJong and Erick Fedde. So, James, do you have anything where we could plant a flag and say this was a good thing that Chris Getz has done?
So is this in terms of like moves or hires?
Yeah, anything.
I mean, I think we talk a lot about Brian Bannister here. He seems pretty good. There's definitely I think at least the performance of Uriarte and Thorpe from the Cease trade has so far at least been like proof of concept of what they saw in those two guys as like being worthy as headliners from the way they produce, the way they've especially with Uriarte being someone that they view as not only such an unfinished project, but like someone they've not really done anything with yet. That Bannister said in Arizona that we were still in the stage of just letting him do what he does and observing it before even like prescribing any big changes for him. Thorpe's kind of in a similar boat, to be honest. He said they really haven't changed much with anything with him since he came over. So I think that's been an encouraging return so far. To try to provide something that's a little bit more peek behind the curtain. It's just everyone, in the organization says that like the communication structure is a lot more straightforward. That as far as like communicating the logic behind injury decisions and roster movement, that they feel like everything's a lot more direct and a little bit less jumbled and a little bit less like you hear one thing from one group and another reason from another group. That it seems like things they're as far as like communicating what's going to happen roster move wise or why it's happening, like up through how they communicate through the chain and how consistent the message is. That's something I've heard is better this year. And Getz is at the top of that structure. So the credit for that would be to him. Now, obviously these are people working for him saying nice things about him. So, but it's something that I've heard time and again, and not in a way on the record public way where it, indicates like, this is the message I'm trying to communicate, but more just people being like, yeah, well, we're losing, but at least it's a better atmosphere. So I can offer that.
And the Barons and the Cannonballers made the postseason, James.
Right, and the Barons are like legit. Like I made a joke, like I wasn't seriously like knocking the Kannapolis roster composition. Like they got Wolcott playing in there, like because of lacking the rookie league team, they really have to play a lot of raw guys in Kannapolis there. So for them to win that championship with the rest they have is impressive. I'm just was making a more general joke of like how if you just prioritize winning minor league championships, you can win a lot with like 24, 25 quad A players, which is why we got away from viewing just minor league win and loss as a bellwether whether your system is good. But in this world where everyone's very development phase, there's less capacity to carry career minor leaguers and everyone is just developing prospects. It is a very good indication that they won 2 divisional championships, especially given how bad their minor league teams have performed over the last couple of years before this. It's a good sign. It would be a great sign if they could be good at AAA because that's your immediate major league depth, but maybe that's down the road at some point.
Well, we're going to take a quick break again for our sponsors, but coming up next, we'll answer the questions from our Twitter followers next on the Sox Machine podcast.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
If you are a small business owner, I'm sure sometimes you feel like you need a marketing degree just to successfully market your business. I'm here to tell you that is not the case if you use Constant Contact. Constant Contact's award-winning platform has powerful marketing tools to make it easy to grow your audience, engage your customers, and sell more. In just a few clicks, you can launch a campaign that is tailored to your business and goals. Maybe you're launching a new product, or releasing a newsletter, or want to tell your customers about upcoming deals. Constant Contact can help with all of that. This includes email, SMS, social media, and so much more, all designed to be easy so you can sell more, raise more, and fast-track business growth. Plus, Constant Contact's award-winning customer service is there for guidance along the way to help you with things like customer lists, templates, and follow-ups. Get going and start growing your business today with a free trial at ConstantContact.com. Constant Contact, helping the small stand tall.
Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. All right, so the questions we got from Twitter. So the first question that we got from Twitter comes from Steve Ochoa. He's at Steve8A. And Steve tweeted to us, everyone is talking about Edgar Queiroz hitting at AAA. I think he's at AA. But yes. How is his catching? At this point, is he as good as Korey Lee, or does Queiroz still have some work to do?
It's hard to assess catching from afar. Everyone says nice things about him, about how dedicated he is to learning pitchers. And, you know, the talking point that's frequently used is that he has a great rapport with Jairo Iriarte. I know I've asked about it a lot and, you know, what's behind it. And, you know, I get some people like kind of dismissively say to me, like, well, they both speak Spanish. Like they get along good, like they communicate well. And I think Queiroz is probably like, you know, the best guy for that, for at least catchers available at Birmingham for Iriarte in terms of just being able to speak Spanish with him. So that's probably why they prefer each other. But his dedication to it, I think, is probably the thing that gets talked about the most, that you can really like bank on it. I don't think like something that Korey Lee has been coming along with and talks about a lot. You know, one of the reasons they tout his model out of being more advanced than him is, you know, pitch calling. And I think he's been put through a lot to make gains in that area in a way that, like, you know, Carroll's not going to be as good as Korey Lee pitch calling because like he does not have major league experience. That will be something that Lee is going to be obviously ahead of him. He's not a Korey Lee pop time because Korey Lee pop time is like literally the best in majors. I think Carroll's supposed to be fine. I don't think he's like that super quick twitch athlete. If anyone got to watch him at like Rickwood, you know, they'll see that this is going to be a base clogger in the good way and the bad way. Like he's has good on base skills, but he's not going to be a good runner. So he's not like that sort of like electric Korey Lee athlete. I mostly like a lot of the messages like he's good enough to stick there. It's probably too early to say like this guy's going to be a good framer, this guy's going to be a good blocker. It's more just like he's defensively capable to stick there at this point, and he has a lot of dedication to it. Like he's not someone who's going to move off of it. He got very mad when I asked him in spring training if anyone had ever suggested him moving off of it purely just because of the strength of his bat. But he's very much like, I'm a catcher. There's no negotiating around that. So it's too early to get really lauded behind. He is good enough to stick there, and he is dedicated to it. We'll see on the rest.
What is the backup plan though, James? Like, to your point, let's say he gets to the majors. The framing numbers are awful, but framing doesn't become important anymore because of the automated ball strike technology coming to the majors. But he's bad at blocking. He can't throw anyone out, and he's not great at pitch calling. So there's doubts about his defensive ability. Is there a backup position defensively for Edgar Queiroz?
If one, like, I think they would view all those things as like, we can get him better at it. But two, like, from what he is, like, it's catcher at first base for Edgar Queiroz. And that's why I think Edgar Queiroz is pretty dedicated to catching, because, you know, the lot one's a harder road in its own way, but he's I think catcher is he's at the top of the defensive spectrum. He would go to the bottom if he didn't stick at catching. But all the optimism around him scouting wise is that like he's fine. He can stick there.
Got it. Well, hopefully he does. And the White Sox can have a good duo with Korey Lee and Edgar Queiroz soon behind home plate. Much like was that 2020 when they had James McCann and Yasmani Grandal. That worked well for the White Sox. Both of them were able to share those responsibilities in the shortened season, and it worked out for James McCann. He got some money.
Still getting that contract.
Still getting that money. He's not good, but he's still getting that money. Our next question comes from Azinrek, which you could follow at Azinrek on Twitter. And Azinrek tweeted to us, James, it is November 2026. What does Lenyn Sosa's career look like? Does he have a role on the next good White Sox team? is trade fodder or is he out of Major League Baseball?
I mean, statistically likely is like quad A player, I guess. Like in terms of his track record and what tends to happen to these guys is I guess he's not really close to like R, but as he runs out of options, like it tends that's kind of the most likely thing is bouncing around on minor league deals. Um, if we want to buy into like his recent kind of offensive improvement and just what his profile could be based on, he's got average power. He can handle infield, second and third. I think if he continues to bloom what he's doing, kind of bench infielder who's a bit more offensive focused, it's not a unreasonable profile for him. Like maybe like what Daniel Descalso was able to be for like a year or two, or like this bench guy or kind of float around the infield guy who's got meaningful pop. That's probably a reasonable outcome. I don't see, certainly not with what they want to happen with Ramos, Colson Montgomery, Jacob Gonzalez, Connor Griffin maybe. I don't see like him establishing himself as like the everyday third baseman is probably what the White Sox view as plan A, but I think if he hits, he can stick in some form. Given that he has some versatility, I don't think shortstop's really in his bag anymore, but second and third baseman who can, put a charge into one, who can hit lefties. That's a guy who sticks around on winning teams. If what we've seen the last 3-4 weeks is what Lenny can really be in the majors, or if we're going to see another kind of regression and chase happy thing, then it's, more quad A guy who bounces around.
I get strong Tyler Saladino vibes from Lenyn Sosa.
Saladino was a lot better defensively, I feel. Like a lot more athletic, a lot more like someone until like his back started to go on him was someone like you'd have him play shortstop and feel good about it. Whereas I think it'd be stretching Lenyn, but Lenyn maybe has a bit more, certainly has hit more in the minors than Saladino is, but Saladino probably has gotten to his power in the majors more than Lenyn does. And those 2 months between he's healthy, Saladino was looking like a god on KBO, and maybe that's Lenyn's future as well.
Right. That's what I'm getting at. Like the same type of career. Like he's on the bad White Sox teams. Then when the White Sox want to be good, they want to find an improvement over Lenyn Sosa to be that super utility type of bench player. Lenyn goes to the KBO or goes to Japan and tries to make a career there. So out of these three options, as in rec, my vote would be out of the league.
I guess like one scenario is like Lenyn is Dayan Viciedo.
Sure.
Right down to like his KBO team weighing whether or not to stick with him at third base or not. He could follow that path.
Our next question doesn't have much to do with the White Sox. It does come from our friend Cherizi E over at From the 108. And Cherizi tweeted to us, which teams do you think will be surprise sellers at the trade deadline? And I don't know, do you have teams lined up, James, that you think could be surprise sellers next month?
I did see this question, so like at least I can think of like
I do have one. So the one that I have is like the Toronto Blue Jays. And the reason I would consider them the reason I consider them a surprise, I mean, right now, as we're recording this, they have lost 6 straight games. They're 35-42. So when you look at the standings, you would say, well, that shouldn't be a surprise. They're 7 games below 500. But I don't know if anyone was expecting this, James, from the Blue Jays. And now there's like serious questions about their near future of what they're going to be, because they only have 1 more year control of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and 2 more years of control of Bo Bichette. And this is an older team that's supposed to be in its contention window, if that sounds familiar. So I think at the beginning of the year, if you told me, yeah, the Blue Jays are going to be selling at the trade deadline, I would be surprised. So that's where I would say the Blue Jays would be a surprise seller.
They're looking very like 2022 White Sox right now.
Not a place you want to be. Not a place you want to be.
I don't think they would, but like, I don't know, the Padres are schizophrenic enough for that, or like they kind of flip their direction a little bit. I think they're going to keep probably just adding, because that's kind of where, I think Preller's in a situation where he's trying to like make good on this contention window. So I'd be doubt that. I think the Reds could probably be a team that like isn't selling or like giving like doing a big rebuild or like backing down, but like could look at where they're at in the halfway point or at the trade deadline and kind of think like, maybe we could trade Frankie Montas instead of let's see if we can get something for the future rather than keeping this around or if they finally pull the trigger on Jonathan India at some point, but not really. If they get Noelvi Marte back from suspension, not view that as something that really knocks them off their stride in some big way or announces that they're giving up for the last 2 months, but more it's just like, let's make use of this resource more than hoarding everything towards our current roster.
What about the Tampa Bay Rays going back to the American League East? They're 38-40 right now. They're 4 games back of the wild card. Do you think they could sell?
100%. That sounds like something that they would very much be willing to do. I don't think they turn up their nose at like selling it all. I could also see them like sell some of their more notable pieces
Like
and then
Randy
play
Arozarena
afterwards. They're they're that sort of team, and definitely from talking to people around them, there's a little bit of we're not good enough this year to really push forward, especially with the restrictions we're out there. We're gonna move some pieces. So yeah, the Rays doing weird selling things even when they're pretty decent is almost not surprising at this point.
Yeah, because other teams, like looking at the standings, like the Pittsburgh Pirates, the owner Bob Nutting has the expectation that they're not going to sell at the deadline. The Pirates are going to try to make the postseason as one of the wild card teams. They think that that is achievable, and they're only a game and a half back. The Washington Nationals are just a half game back of the wild card right now. But realistically, like, are they ready? Like, I don't see them being big buyers. I just don't know if it makes sense to stand pat. Like, I'm still confused with the Nationals and what's going on here.
I would imagine they're not trying to like spend prospects to add at this point. I think you are wary of take ripping like the guts out of the clubhouse and taking steam out of like what they're doing. But I certainly don't think you're at the position where you're spending what a contender usually has to spend to meaningfully add in the off. Like you're not trading James Wood to get like a starter at the deadline. Like that's not where your organization is. So I think if they bought it all, it'd be very limited. And I think they just as soon, like, whatever the price is for like, hey, we're adding John Brebbio. We're super serious now. Like it's something that's not like going to put out their prospect system in some big way. But I would more lean towards small sell off or, small selling of pieces that don't necessarily change the direction in some big way than them really spending prospect resources to push this team forward.
Well, Chirizi, thank you so much for your question. Our next question from Twitter comes from Kevin Nash. He's at Kevin R. Nash on Twitter. And this is in regards to the anonymous Major League Baseball player poll from The Athletic. The Chicago White Sox did not grade very well with the player poll, and they do not have a good reputation from a free agent player perspective. Kevin's asking, if we were in charge, James, how would we go about changing that reputation for the White Sox where they become a more desired place to sign than they currently are?
Probably like a coherent like vision, which I think they're trying to formulate now. A bit more like clear direction, cohesiveness between like what's being talked about as the mission on the everyday basis in the clubhouse, and also just like what the long term is. But I think a lot of that has to be like changing personnel. Probably a lot of the voting from that's negative about being at the White Sox is based on like how bad the clubhouses were the last couple of years, and some of that's just the smoke of that still lingering.
Were they that bad? Just out of curiosity, from your point of view, would you say like, yeah, this is not I'm not feeling the vibes. The vibes are bad, or a Gen Z phrase, the aura is bad in the clubhouse.
That's at least what they say now. In retrospect, I obviously wasn't around for like a lot of the key moments or the blow ups last year, but a lot of them say like it was a lot of like maybe not so much even infighting. It's just like, hey, this team is going down. I want out. And not being in an environment where it feels like we've given up, this is not working, everyone realizes this is not working, but we're still stuck in it. So I think a lot of it just has to be kind of an overhaul of, what the team core is and what, establishing a new direction. I think maybe the vibes are pretty good in Birmingham and things will be better in the White Sox when that makes up the majority of their clubhouse structure. Guys who are kind of can see a future together with each other and trust that, they've had success in the past and they're going to again. Whereas right now it's very much so transitory that it seems like the atmosphere is pretty good in terms of everyone kind of understanding where they're at and knowing they're headed, but it's also like everybody knows that this team is not built to win, and at this point has established that they can't win, and kind of expects that to happen every day, and is just trying to play well and support each other until the next transition comes. So I don't think it's a friendly and good to work clubhouse, but I don't think it's necessarily conducive towards achieving, the goals that they would have of being very confident about this team winning right now, because everyone kind of knows what it is at the state, that this is a last place team that's going to sell, and let's just try to make the best out of it, which they're doing a good job of making that being a peaceful place to work. But obviously it's not something that the fans appreciate the work product of.
No, I guess I imagine the White Sox have a great reputation. Hey, I'm 35 years old and I still want to play Major League Baseball. So at least there's the White Sox that I can fall back to and sign a 1-year contract and prove that I can still play in the majors and get playing time in the majors. The White Sox will have that reputation for the rest of this season and probably next season as well.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, that your goal would this year to be establish this as a place where you can be kind of maybe in a bad position or even at the end of your rope, and they made you better and prepared you to have success elsewhere in your major league career. That's definitely the message that like Getz was trying to push in spring training, is that we hope we establish themselves as a place where you can kind of get on track and have success, because that's the kind of like free agents and players they're targeting right now, rather than marketing this as a place of we're serious and we're ready to win every day and you better be in line with that, like, because that's obviously what you want long term. But kind of the more, here's a nice home for you to get right, is more what they're trying to establish a reputation as right now, and that's obviously not necessarily what you want 5 years down the road, but it's a decent enough place to wring out of their current situation.
I also wonder, part of the bad feedback for the White Sox is that they haven't signed a player to a contract more than $100 million. So that gives off the impression to other players of Major League Baseball that the White Sox are always cheap, that you will not receive, if you are worth it, or if you think you're worth a lot of money, you will not receive a contract offer from the White Sox. And until they get over that hurdle, until they sign a player over $100 million, they may still have that reputation. So maybe that's another thing that I would change, because I mean, San Diego didn't have the greatest reputation in the world either until they signed Manny Machado, and now that's completely changed everything for the Padres. So probably a new chairman would be needed.
Yeah, especially like even if in extension talks where it's the players like, hey, I know that they're going to try to like get a deal because they know they can't pay me like top dollar. So if I really want to earn the most, I can. That potential like lies outside of this organization, and that can be implicit understanding even when you're trying to give someone good value for where they're at in the with their service time and their track record. They could still be like, hey, if they are willing to do this, knowing their reputation, my bigger payday is like kind of holding out and going out for more, because like this is not a team that's pays people the big contracts across the league.
And we saw that, right? Dylan Cease signed up with Scott Boras. Well, writing's on the wall. Cease's time with the White Sox. And yeah, he just said Robert also signed with Boras. So here for a good time, not a long time for some people.
It's not so much of a good time either, but
it's not good right now. No, that's a good point. But Kevin, thank you so much for your question. 2 more questions before we sign off. Pretty quick answers to these. Rob had a lengthy question to us on Twitter. Rob wrote to us, with the new television network beginning next season, do you think Chuck and Ozzie will continue to host the pre and post game show, or that they will bring in a new team? The answer to that question, Rob, is I don't know. And it really depends on like the format of this new network and where it resides with Comcast. Comcast is pushing RSNs to the premium tier. I don't have Comcast. I have YouTube TV. So YouTube TV has been taking these RSNs and including them in the sports package. which is a additional monthly fee on top of your monthly subscription to YouTube TV. I don't have a problem paying that because YouTube TV is nice and they add NFL Red Zone to that sports package. So yeah, for me as a YouTube TV subscriber, if the White Sox's new network, if YouTube decides that you're going to go into the premium, I'm already paying extra, but I have to pay extra to get that White Sox network. Let's see on how the negotiations work for the White Sox between them and Comcast, because Comcast is the biggest provider in the Chicagoland area when it comes to cable. Once they got that situation figured out, they probably have a better understanding of what type of money that they have. And it is going to be a money situation, whether or not they bring back Chuck and Ozzy to the new network. I'm assuming, Rob, that they will. But first, they got to figure out where they're going to live in the cable world. James, I don't know if you have thoughts about pre and post game show. You rarely get a chance to watch it because you're working.
Yeah, you'll see it on in the clubhouse a little bit, but like usually not with the sound super high. I don't have any specific intel on it. I just think like, I don't know, I would expect them to be back. I think it's understood that they're kind of institutions, so and get a lot of praise from media reporters. So I would think so, but who knows? It's kind of this TV network whirlwinds and contract stuff always tends to come out weird. So I wish it was more certain for those guys, but I don't know.
The path has been weird already, and how this new network is being established. So a lot of unknowns, Rob. But right now, if I were a betting man, and I am, I would say yes, but there's still a lot of hurdles for the White Sox. And let's include the Chicago Bulls and Blackhawks and exactly where this new network resides on the cable affiliates. And then finally, Ed Casey. Ed tweeted to us, "Hi, Josh. You wrote in your most recent draft post that you feel the White Sox should be targeting position players in the draft. Who are some hitters you would like that you hope the White Sox might select after pick number 5? It's not so much I think they should be targeting position players. That's just what we're hearing, James, is that the rumors and whispers are the White Sox are interested in taking a position player at pick 5. If you've been following the draft coverage that I've been writing up all season long, you have probably a good understanding that I think the world of Hagen Smith, and I think Hagen Smith in the hands of Brian Bannister could be a very good addition for the Chicago White Sox. But to the points that you've been making, James, the White Sox are very aware that with all the trades that they have made so far, it's been very heavy on pitcher returns. And correct me if I'm wrong, there's this speculation right now that for all teams, not just for the White Sox, but for all teams with this upcoming trade deadline, if there's any blockbuster deals, it's probably not other teams' top position player prospects that are involved. It's probably their best pitchers in their farm system getting dealt. So even if the White Sox were busy before the deadline, they still may struggle acquiring position player depth to pad their farm system.
Yeah, like pitchers are just inherently more erratic assets and thus they're less valuable, even if like they're the same grade for performance. Like the pitcher would be less valuable because the injury risk and the performance variation is higher. So you're, one where you're selling Cease, who's just, fundamentally less reliable than like any like a similar star level hitter. Even in seeing like, Eric Longenhagen's future value in his calculations for his prospects, like future value is not necessarily OFP. It's about like what his value would be. It's just easier for a hitter to be the highest on that scale because there can be more certainty about it than there would ever be for a pitcher. So I think that plays into, on the market, it's just going to be harder to line up because they're going to hold their hitter more valuable and be less willing to part with it. The same way, like it's so hard to get the prospect value to match up with Luis Robert. It's hard to find the win now player who justifies giving up like your Gunnar Henderson prospect before he debuts, because he's just so valuable based on the erraticness of the pitcher. So I think it's knowing that system and also just like their experience from the Cease talks that they found it hard to pry position prospects out that they wanted, that it's a little bit of like, well, maybe best way to actually get these is going to be on our own, even if we think theoretically we could just develop all the pitchers and then be able to trade them for a position prospect of that we want eventually. It might just be easier to get our own.
Yes, and that's where the draft comes into play for the White Sox, especially at pick number 5. If they're going to add an impact position player into their farm system, it's most likely at the 5th pick. And with lots of rumors right now and word that the Colorado Rockies are looking at pitcher from Wake Forest, Chase Burns, who throws over 100 miles an hour and has an excellent 4-pitch mix, led the country in strikeouts this year, that the Rockies are going to continue this theme of adding elite pitchers into their farm system because free agent pitchers are not going to sign with them at pick 3. That means somebody gets to drop to the White Sox at pick 5. And again, I wrote about them on SoxMachine.com. Thanks to James also contributing to that report. You could read that as far as the 4 players that I pointed out. JJ Weatherholt, shortstop, let's just call him middle infielder for West Virginia. Jack Caglione, mocked heavily right now to the White Sox, first baseman, left-handed pitcher from the University of Florida. We've been hearing a lot about the White Sox and their ties to prep star Connor Griffin, who was just named Gatorade National Player of the Year for high schoolers in 2024. And maybe, just maybe, if the dominoes fall right for the White Sox, Oregon State second baseman Travis Bazzana, but that's probably the long shot. Now, players that I think you should be watching as we record this on Sunday, Tennessee and Texas A&M. Tennessee won game 2, so that forces game 3. So the College World Series final is going to be Monday night, big sports night, Monday night. The Stanley Cup Finals going to game 7 between Edmonton and Florida. You got College World Series winner take all, game 3. And of course, White Sox and Dodgers. So if you're looking for second screen action and you're watching because of the MLB draft, Dylan Dreiling for Tennessee is their left fielder, and he bats left-handed, and he hit a big home run for Tennessee in game 2 to help the Volunteers come back and win that game to push it to game 3. Pretty much any hitter from Tennessee, that school led the team, led the country in home runs. We've heard Tyler Bell is a target. He's a local kid from the Chicagoland area, is maybe a possibility for the White Sox after the first round. Another prep player they could possibly add. Then you have some college catchers, Kevin Basil from Texas Tech, Jacob Cozart from NC State. He's one of those typical son of a college coach, knows the game well, was a team leader for a very good NC State team that made it to Omaha. The thing about after the first round with this particular draft, and I'm already starting to get some pushback, like, well, I want the White Sox to take high ceiling guys. After the first 20 picks, the ceiling gets pretty low. So you're going to be looking at high floor types of guys, like maybe like a Casey Cook out of North Carolina that had a really good season. You may also see the White Sox still spend draft picks in their first 5 rounds on college pitchers. There's a lot of ties with Connor Foley from Indiana. I like Luke Holman a lot from LSU as a possibility for the White Sox at pick 43. It's going to get really interesting. It's going to be very chaotic, but that's what makes the MLB draft fun after pick 20 this particular year. But if you're someone like pounding the table, I want high ceiling guys for the White Sox for every pick. For this particular draft class, the ceiling is pretty low, unfortunately. But I don't think that's the case at pick 5. I do think the White Sox have a chance to get somebody very good at the 5th pick. We're still a few weeks away from the MLB draft, so we'll see what happens. And I'm sure there'll be more mocks and more whispers and more rumors, and we will report on all that on SoxMachine.com. But thank you to everyone for your guys' questions this week in PO Sox. This was fun. Other people pestering James with questions. I hope you had fun, James. Other than getting to write about these, you get to talk about them.
I had a blast. I did inappropriately compare the symptoms of schizophrenia to disordered corporate organizational thinking, and that those two are not analogous, and I should not have compared them in such a way. I'm just trying to say the Padres do weird things. That does not equate to mental illness.
Thank you for that clarification. We were all wondering about that, but no, thank you to everyone that listened to this episode. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also listen to the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James. He'll be back reporting for Sox Machine during this homestand at the White Sox games. We'll be getting that coverage and getting that audio and additional insight. Follow him at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. And with James being at the games this week, again, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. You can gain full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox by signing up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. Monthly plans start at $5. We also have additional tiers of support as well if you want additional benefits from us. And we do have annual discounts if you do sign up for an annual subscription. Again, sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.
As a veteran, I live with health impacts from my service. VA healthcare means you're in 100% control of your own medical care, your own benefits, and it only takes minutes to set up. A veteran should enroll in VA healthcare because it ensures that they get quality, high-level care for the rest of their lives. My service was then, my benefits are now.
Get what you earned. Visit choose.va.gov. Not all veterans are eligible for the type or amount of benefits mentioned here.